It's me again, Miranda. I'm back. Long time no speak. Sorry, I don't know why I'm being so awkward. I am talking to you like you're my least favourite ex, which you absolutely are not. So let me try again. Hello! Good to speak with you guys. It's been quite the hiatus. So I'm back, and this video is to talk about exams. So I don't know if some of you remember, but not that long ago I put up a little Q&A situation on my Instagram to get all your questions about exams on the Clinical Psychology Doctorate. And today is the day which I will be answering those questions, which is very timely and very appropriate, given that this morning I just found out that I passed my remaining 3 exams of my clinical psychology experience. So no more exams until post-qualification, which is just... I also feel like this means that I can answer your question with this newfound wisdom and sage-like calm, which I think is just mutually beneficial. So I've organised your questions into themes and I'm gonna give them my best shot. So let's get straight into it. So let's first just back up a little bit and think about exams and the doctorate programs more generally, because I definitely did have a little handful of you, just freaking out, worried that every single course will make you sit exams, which is absolutely not the case. So I would say my course is in the small but significant minority of courses which have exams as part of their assessment procedures. So if you're a person that just exams strike the fear of God into you and you couldn't possibly tolerate sitting another, you can totally avoid it. You just have to be a little bit savvy as to where you apply. Could be worse. So in terms of the number of exams, just to say that there will be variability from course to course. So take this video as like a general flavour of what exams are like. But for me, from my experience, I have sat 5 exams in total. So 2 in first year, 3 in second year. So not terrible, is it? And these have followed our core modules, which are child and adolescent mental health, adult, learning disability, clinical neuropsychology, and older adults. So when you open up an exam, what can you expect from the format? Well, for our exams, every single one, it was vignette based. So all of the questions based off of the vignette. What is a vignette, I hear you ask? Great question. So a vignette is essentially case information that you get about a particular client. So it's kind of what you'd imagine a really, really good and thorough referral to look like. So this will give you some information about the presenting issues, but also some contextual stuff like around their relationships, employment status, important past events, triggers, all of those things. It's kind of like this cauldron, this mess of all this information that you need to make sense of. So I think that's kind of important to say about the vignettes, is that there's enough information there that you could probably take it in a number of different ways. It's open to interpretation. So it's not like everyone is trying to arrive at exactly the same answer, which I think, is a little bit reassuring, maybe. So the questions themselves, like they're not essay based in the traditional sense. They're not essay based at all. As I said, all of the questions will be based off the information that you get in the vignette, and some of them will be shorter form. So a question like, what are the presenting issues? Short answer. Or you might get a longer form question like, what would be your treatment plan? And for our exams, they're broken up into different chunks, so we will always get a section on professional issues. So that will ask us to identify, prioritise and manage issues like consent, confidentiality, risk, safeguarding, neglect, that kind of stuff. And then we have a section which asks us questions around assessment, formulation and treatment. So for us, they follow the same structure, and it's about kind of the application of knowledge and being able to justify your responses with respect to the information that is given in the vignette. Now for us, we were originally going to start off doing our exams in proper exam conditions, face-to-face, in first year, but obviously the world changed. So we've now moved to doing open book exams. So I'm not sure if that's going to stick around forever, but it's certainly been one of the very few upsides of this whole corona situation. So let's think a little bit more, focus in on the topics, the content of the exams, and what you're expected to know. So as I said, we've got the 5 exams which follow the core modules of the course, which are child, adult, learning disability, older adult, and clinical neuropsychology. So as I mentioned before, each of these always has a professional issues section, which I think is really nice, very helpful. That means that you have this pool of general information which straddles not a good word, is it? This general pool of information that you can draw on irrespective of the specific exam that you're sitting. So I guess what I mean by that is that it doesn't matter who the focus of the vignette is, you're always going to need to know about things like consent and confidentiality and managing risk. But some groups, for certain professional issues, there'll be an extra addendum, let's say, that we need to think about. So say the issue of consent, fairly straightforward, but then there are additional things that you need to consider and hold in mind when, say, working with children, or people with a learning disability, or people who've experienced a head injury, or who are living with dementia, for example. Realistically, across the board, there tends to be a handful of core documents that you need to be relatively familiar with, things like the BPS Code of Ethics, those kind of documents, which will help you answer those questions. Moving on to the second and sometimes third section, so this will look at the assessment, formulation, and treatment questions. So this is when you need to just be relatively familiar with the therapeutic approaches which are taught on your course. So for us, it's CBT, Psychodynamic Interpersonal Therapy, or PIT. We've got systemic approaches, and we've got neuropsychology. So in our first year exams, we're kind of shoehorned a little bit more. So we are asked to think about the vignette from a CBT perspective, for example, and a PIT perspective. But then in our second year exams, which I think probably reflects that the second year exams are a little bit more specialist in terms of the client groups, but also hopefully that we're progressing a little bit in terms of what they're expecting from us. But we're able to draw on any of those approaches as long as we can justify it and tie it to the vignette and explain why we've come to that decision. So when you have your assessment questions, you're going to need to know how you would look for certain information. If you wanted to find out about someone's mood, are you going to use a clinical interview, or are you going to use a good old-fashioned questionnaire, which psychologists love to use? And then when you're thinking about your formulation and your intervention, kind of need to get to grips with what approach you want to use. So say if I have a vignette for an adult with social anxiety, I might say, okay, CBT approach for social anxiety looks appropriate. So you need to draw out a diagrammatic formulation and be able to write one, and then also give some suggestions as to the treatment plan based on your CBT knowledge. So I think as to this question, I feel like the exams in a way are quite nice because there is a lot of theory there and there is a lot of textbook type knowledge, but it is the information that you will be using as a trainee in your services and working therapeutically with your clients. So obviously, timing wise, we didn't do it in the format that was initially planned so if we had done them face to face, the papers would have taken us between 2 and 3 hours to complete, depending on which exam we were sitting. But as we've now moved to open book, I'm not sure if open book is staying forever, but we are definitely advocating for it. But now that we're in open book, we got given about a day and a half to complete each paper. So I think holding that in mind with respect to this question, which I guess is around reasonable adjustments, we haven't been given a day and a half because it should take you a day and a half to write a question which is of passable standard. It's more like if you have everything in your mind and you're focused, you could complete it in the 2 to 3 hours. But the uni are kind of doing us a solid, showing us some flexibility and being like, look, you are working from home. People have other responsibilities. People have small children running around, and you are also mature students. So we're going to give you a block of time, and when you choose to complete the exam, it's kind of up to you as long as you submit it by a particular deadline. And obviously there's just the guidance that we don't speak to each other, obviously. Now, as far as marking goes, this is my favourite part because all of our exams pass-fail. That's all we get to know, which has been so refreshing for me because I'm just the person who's always been chasing like the A star in first, so it's just like so nice not to have to worry about that anymore. So yeah, we literally just get told pass, fail. We also get a borderline pass, which is just a bit like, I mean, what does it even mean? It means you've passed. What you've written is a passable standard, but like
only just. So don't get cocky.
Which is fine, whatever. They can say that if they want. As far as the weighting, like, you just have to pass everything. So for each, like, module of the course, you have to pass the exam, you have to pass your case report, and you have to pass your placement. And then you move on. So you can't fail anything. So speaking on failure, what happens when you fail? So this is like not funny
because my world would be completely destroyed if I failed. Like it would take me a very long time to pick myself up.
But I think it's important to be cognizant of the fact that the world doesn't actually end despite how you feel, because you are always given a chance to resit. And you have an academic tutor when you're doing your doctorate, so they're going to be on side to kind of help you out, understand what went wrong, what extra support you might need. And, you know, obviously if you just keep failing like that, that's not a good thing. But I think once you get on training, you'll realise just how on side everyone is, and they want to give you everything you need to get you over the line. So I would just say, like, try not to worry about that too much, because it's just so rare that people don't figure it out in the end. And just finally on the marking, so for my course it is just pass, fail, like we don't get anything else. I don't know if there's a marking out of 100. I have heard of it before, I can't exactly place which course it was though. But like, who even cares? Like, what does a high score even mean? Like, you can't graduate as a clinical psychologist with distinction, so the high mark is imaginary. Don't worry about it. It's made up. So we do get revision time built into the academic calendar. I think everyone will have their own opinions as to whether they feel like that's enough time, of course. So when things were originally planned to do face-to-face exams, which was the case with our first exam for adults in March, we got given Monday to Thursday to revise, and then Friday would be our exam day. Actually, as it turned out, we did all the revision and then the exam got cancelled on like the Thursday. It was absolutely wild. And then we moved to open book. So open book, I think you get a little less time to revise. So in the most recent first week of exams, we had 3 days to revise and then 2 days to complete the first 2 papers. And then we completed the final paper the following week. And I know this doesn't sound like an awful lot, but I'm not saying this to be like, but genuinely, I did not revise outside of the time that was given to us, even when it was going to be like a face-to-face timed exam situation, because time, inclination, none of it was coming together. So I genuinely only used the time that was allotted to me, and you were able to pass. And I think it's also important to say that it's not like you never touch the material that you need for the exams until you get around to revision, because actually a lot of the skills that you need to demonstrate in your exams, you're practicing all the time when you're on placement. But in addition to that, so how to revise and prepare. So I feel like I've used the same formula for revision, like time immemorial, always, and it's worked pretty well. And I think it's just really familiarising yourself with past exam papers, which you're given, past exam scripts, which you are also given, and the mark scheme. And I think what you're trying to deduce from those 3 sources is, what do I need to revise, and what is surplus to requirements, and how do I write my answers so that I get the credit that I need. And one thing what's also really nice about my course, might be the case in others, is that for each module, we've had these magical crib sheets, which have just been passed down from generation to generation, where it's like this amalgamation of this amazing information, anything you could want to know about working with a particular client group. So if that sort of stuff doesn't exist on your course, I think that's an amazing thing, really important thing to put together, just that kind of short form, bullet point of everything that you might need to know for that particular subject. And I think just on memorization, obviously that is a little bit of a moot point for open book exams, but even for the timed exam conditions, there isn't a lot of pressure to like memorize studies and references. Like you might know a couple, but it's not too intense. And I think just as a whole, it's not so much about annoying rote learning. It's more like the application of your knowledge that they're really interested in. Oh, honestly, comparing DClinPsy exams to undergrad, like the light could not be shining more favourably on what you do on the DClinPsy. Like undergrad was just a nightmare. Like in terms of the number of exams, just like the intensity of revision that was needed, and also just like memorising like irrelevant stuff. Like I remember at one point when I was doing my undergrad, I could have reeled off like 100 names and dates relating to specific studies, and it's like, for what? Like that is not a test of intellect, it's a test of memory. And even more annoying, like I still remember some of my exam questions. I wrote this timed essay on lightness and darkness. Like literally, how does the human eye discern shadows? Like who gives a shit? And I think maybe that's the thing, as a postgraduate student, you just double down more and more on your interests and you fine-tune what it is that you're focusing on. So everything on the doctorate is relatively interesting to me, so I don't feel super aggrieved about revision or doing exams on particular things. But I think also, as like you will have picked up from other things that I've said, like it does very much mirror what you need to be doing when you work clinically with someone. So it feels like a very fair test of our skills, first and foremost, and also something that's relatively useful, which also helps. So as far as what it was like coming back to exams after a break from undergrad, like honestly, just like riding a bike, to be fair. Like we're examined to the nth degree in this country. We are doing yearly, at least yearly exams from the age of 6 to 22. So even if you have a few years break, like I doubt you're gonna forget how to get back into it. Like you'll be absolutely fine. So my personal reflections on this experience.
Well, haven't I been giving you my personal opinions throughout this? Like, is this section necessary?
I'm going to give them to you anyway. So I think you can probably tell from this video that I don't think the exams have been that bad. Like, look, what have we gone through up until this point? GCSEs. Terrible. A-levels. Horrific. Undergrad.
Demoralising.
Like, we have been through so much that when you then look at the doctorate exams, like, it's just not that bad. And also, we've got a proven track record of being able to get through exams. So, like, you can do it. But I think also, even within the doctorate, it's honestly been probably my preferred form of assessment. Like, I've much preferred the exams to, say, an OSCE, where I have to role play with someone, which is horrendous. I preferred them to case reports, and I preferred them to audits. So, like, even within that little frame of assessment, like, honestly, fairly positive feedback. But I think, you know, on a more sober note, I genuinely feel like the exams have helped to improve my confidence, because I think it is the only assessment format where you're not given any feedback in the process. So say like everything else that you do, case report wise, etc., you usually get other people to look it over and will give you feedback. This is the only thing that is contained until the point of evaluation. So I think that process and then getting feedback where someone with more skill and more expertise than you looks at what you've written and says,
that seems reasonable.
like, I feel that's given me such a vote of confidence in terms of my own clinical judgment, and I think it genuinely has made me feel more confident in my own opinions and voicing them. So that brings us to the end of the Q&A. I hope you found it informative. We'll caveat that with the fact that this has been a little bit of a warm-up video for me, you know, post-hiatus. So if I didn't quite get to the root of your query, feel free to just pop it in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you. Or, better yet, DM me on Instagram. DM me. You know, respectfully, professionally, on Instagram, because my response rate there is much better. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there for now before I start saying other weird shit. But I'm not sure when I'm gonna be back. Who knows? Hopefully not too long. So in the meantime, take care of yourselves and ciao for now.